I'd like to call to order special town commission meeting of February the 8th, 2022. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Mayor Tompeck,
Here.
Vice Mayor Kurzman,
Yes.
Commissioner Campo,
Here.
Commissioner Fender,
Here.
Commissioner Mayfield.
Here.
Okay, I don't have any comment cards, so I guess we can move on to any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda.
None.
I have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Kurzman,
Yes.
Commissioner Campo,
Yes.
Commissioner Fender,
Here.
Commissioner Mayfield.
Here. I mean, yeah, I just all of you.
Mayor Tompeck,
Here. Yes. Have to start training you again, Frank, or what? Okay, we have no new old business, and we do have some new business, the approval of the interim town manager contract. I was going to ask Glenn if he wanted to lead us into this, but since he's not here, I guess we can take some, or have some discussion from the commission. I assume everybody's had a chance to review the contract. Is there any questions or changes anybody wishes to make?
No, it's good to me.
It can't be this easy. Come on. You're killing me here.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Campo,
Aye.
Commissioner
wait.
Fender,
Wait, I wanted to ask something real
Oh, I'm
quick.
sorry.
Is it, town manager, is it good to just do it without having the attorney say, yay, this is all, should we wait for him to give it the final approval, or?
I think his transmittal constitutes
Okay.
his approval.
Okay. Thank you, that was it.
Commissioner Fender,
Aye.
Commissioner Mayfield,
Yes.
Mayor Tompeck,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kurzman.
Yes.
Okay, so that brings us to item 7A, which is preliminary town manager search discussion. And I think, Mr. Hudson, why don't you start the discussion on this item?
All right, thank you. During the interviews last week, you asked a question about if I or Paul in that case would be willing to lead the town manager search, and so I didn't want to take that as direction, so I did want to get maybe on the record what your thoughts are on terms of who should be conducting the search. And you basically have three options: either do it internally using myself, primarily assisted by others on staff, obviously. The second option would be to use a consulting firm, and I think you had some experience with that. And then the third option would be to use the retired volunteers who have city manager experience, and there's a description of all of that in your packet. So those are your three principal choices. So
I was trying to remember, and I wasn't on the commission at the time, but when we did the search for the last town manager, we did use, some of the retired folks, and my recollection was that didn't necessarily turn out as well as we had hoped for. Is that correct?
Yes, we didn't get, we got some people, but it wasn't, the people, none of us put them as the top candidate, the ones that did come in, if I recall correctly.
Commissioner Mayfield?
Yeah, Vice Mayor, refresh my memory. So we did it twice, and the first one was through the ICMA, and then the second time was just through like Indeed, and I don't know if the mayor at that time,
We did get a couple from ICMA. We had a gentleman that was a manager out in the Keys.
right, that was
That was from ICMA. They also brought us in somebody that was not from the area, they were out of state. They brought us that person. The majority of everything we got was from Indeed. We got a large amount of responses. you know, we could use both. I mean, we shouldn't limit ourselves just to one or two sources. Whatever we could do, if the cost makes sense, you know, obviously if it's free, absolutely. If it's just a couple $100 to put an ad out, absolutely.
Yeah, I was just trying to remember exactly how it went down, whether it was him, the first go-round was through ICMA, the candidates we got, we had like 10 of them, right? We did the whole
I tried
thing.
to see what came in from where, because at the time I was asking the office, what's generating more. Indeed definitely generated a lot of leads, but also a lot of not good candidates came out of this. So we had to weed through them. There's a lot of weeding, but you had some good quality leads that were in there when we did do it. I believe when we had the finalists, out of the 4 finalists, I think that we had, or the 6 finalists, whatever it was, I think only one of them was burdened by, or 2 of them were from ICMA, the others were Indeed.
Okay.
So,
I was just trying to remember, I was new and it was all coming at me and I wasn't behind the scenes at that point, really knowing what was happening, so.
Still coming at you.
Commissioner Fender?
So I was pretty in the thick of it, and I don't recall there being a problem using ICMA and Indeed, and I wouldn't think we'd want to limit ourselves. It's just my opinion. I don't think it's a matter of whether they brought strong candidates or not, because I think candidates come at the luck of the market at any given time. And so they're just another communication arm to pass the word around people that are actually in the industry that there's an availability. What we should do, perhaps, is do what we did last time, is invite the head of the ICCMA to come and give us a little 5-minute talk about how they might want to be involved. Maybe they don't want to be, right? And also what they would charge, if anything, and I think it's free. I could be wrong. But regardless, if the price is right, I think we should have many feelers in the market as possible, and I think we probably have the 2 weeks it takes to get them here. I could be wrong, but I think also you definitely, I thought the process we followed the last 2 times was fine. And I think I gave you the cycle of what it was. I don't have the sheet in front of me this time, but it's public record from the last meeting. So, I think you should take that and sort of structure the process from a 50,000-foot view. And I think Mr. Hudson has adept skills at project management and leading such an effort, and so it would be my hope that he would help us, since he's here every day, just coordinating that activity and making sure that we're following the timeline that we need to follow. But I'm flexible, whatever you guys have a vision for. I liked our quantitative approach, so I would recommend that we also use some system like HR Avatar again to give us some quantitative ranking of the candidates that come before us.
Did you have anything additional? You were talking before when your light went on.
Oh, the lights are switched, so you might be.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Okay.
actually- yeah.
I'm sorry. Commissioner Campbell.
Keeping on your toes. Just for, I think, research and background, I think both 8 years ago and 2 years ago, with both Pam Walker and Michelle Berger, we used the ICMA senior managers. I think that they are somewhat rigid in their approach, and Frank had some suggestions that they initially bristled at. So if we are to bring them in, then I think we should probably say that we want to use the tools that you introduced, HR, Avatar, and Indeed, because I remember it was a fellow from Vero who was our coach, let's say. He kind of bristled and kind of snickered at some of those things, and I would rather let them know with full expectations that that's how we want to approach this, because they're spending their time and effort. If they're going to come down, they need to feel comfortable with it. Having said all that, I think that it would make sense for us to have a pitch from a recruiting firm, because I think we get a range of candidates. The ICMA Code of Ethics has strict guidelines as far as who recruiters can talk to. So I don't know if you're familiar with the term pocket listing in the real estate business, where a realtor doesn't put it on multiple listings, but they kind of have it in their back pocket, and someone says, hey, I have a vacant lot that I want to buy on Heritage, as an example. They might say, hey, I know something that might be in the works. There's a fella, Colin Basinger, something like that. Benziger, who is popular around town, and I think Dave Collier represented them when we were looking. I think it might be worthwhile at least hearing their value proposition to see how they think that they're over and above the standard firms of the senior advisor, and maybe have the senior advisor, the ICMA, say, look, this is how we would do it before we make a decision. I think the search firm guarantees that if the manager does not fit, that they'll either refund or replace. So I just think it would be worth going through that extra process before we make a decision.
Glenn, we got a little away from you, but I was wondering if you could, I know you talked to the ICMA several weeks ago. I wonder if you could fill us in on that discussion.
Well, just that kind of, the gentleman outlined in his letter, they're willing to help out, but I wouldn't say they were doing backflips to do the job either. It was pretty clear that more than once he said, we're volunteers, and I want you to realize we're volunteers, and remember, we're volunteers. And so you kind of got and again, great guy, just like the last guy was a great guy. And I spoke to the fellow from the last time because he used to be the manager in Boynton Beach a long time ago, and he doesn't do it anymore. And, I may have a cruise planned in 2 weeks. So basically, they will do what they can to help, because that's what they're here for. Particularly cities of less than 10,000, they'll help out. But, they won't do the background searches. They'll expect you to do that, but they will help out. And, he's now willing to get involved, but he wanted to make it clear, as I think I made it clear, I didn't mean to be funny about it, but really, they're volunteers, and how much they're going to put into it just depends on their schedule. If they have something else planned in their personal life, this isn't the number one priority in that person's life.
So they're volunteers.
Yeah, that's I don't know how you got that, but yes.
If I could just add one thing. When we used them last time, we were like virtually at the altar with our top three, and the senior advisor just disappeared. Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
Yeah. So that's the time that I don't want someone going on a cruise. I mean, this is probably the most important decision that we'll make, even beyond the budget, maybe for your whole term,
At least for the next 2 years.
But for you three. I think we need as much tools and background as we can, because we want to, we all have aggressive agendas, and we want to take a look at all of what's available, whether it's a person that's openly not looking, or maybe it's someone that's a finance director. Maybe it's someone that's a finance director in West Palm Beach, and they want to step up and be a full-fledged town manager, but maybe they're not, publicly looking around. There are provisions within contracts that state once you made application, you need to notify your employer, and a search firm has that cushion, has the ability to filter and to kind of meander around some things that the ICMA Code of Ethics is going to hamstring us. And, I want to cast the net as wide as possible, because it's a big decision to make. And if you amortize the cost over the number of years that they'll stay, I think it's reasonable.
Commissioner Mayfield.
Yes, I was going to say, obviously, concurring with all this, the town manager position is very important, particularly, I think, in this small town and all the hats they wear. Just off the cuff, it seems like a combination of the ICMA and our highly qualified interim town manager, who said he was open to that we could kind of do what we did last time, but I'm also open to a search firm listening to a presentation. I don't think we got that the last go-round. I did speak to Colin when we were talking about the prior town manager's contract, and I had mentioned, as the mayor, if we wanted to get someone in to talk about a search, a third-party search firm and what it would cost. And this is, this is not definite, but he mentioned it would be like 25 to 30,000 for his firm services. I think he's at the higher end. Anyways, I just wanted to put that out there. But I would be open to hearing what they say, so.
I would too, and of course, the advantage there is that they do the background search, whereas the ICMA, and if we did it by ourselves, we'd have to go out and do a background search. So a lot of that $25,000 would be sucked up by that, I'm sure. I kind of was doing a little bit of thinking about this, and relative to, Dan's interview a couple weeks ago, when he talked about, the process of hiring a full-time town manager, talked about first about making sure the job description is exactly the way we want it, and that's why I'd asked them to send out the job description to make sure everybody was comfortable with that. He had talked about putting together a little brochure, and I think that's a positive thing. And, at that point in time, we could, we could either post it ourselves, and we certainly know all these different sites that are available to post it on. One of the things that we could do is we could do the initial screening by the town manager, and if he'd like some help, I'm available to do that. I was thinking that, at that point in time, we could get it down to between 7 and 10 candidates and get that out to all the commissioners. And at the same time, if we thought it was appropriate, we could develop the citizens committee that we had talked about a little bit. Each one of us identifying somebody to be on the committee. We could give them the same 10 resumes that the town commissioners are getting, and they could certainly, review them and maybe reduce it down to 3 to 5, the same thing that we would do. And also, they might want to generate questions that they'd like us to ask the candidates as well. And then we could do the, the interviews either, publicly like we did the interim town manager, or we could do them, kind of round robin like I think we've done before. So that's certainly one way of doing it, which we could do it ourselves, and we could pop in, and then, of course, once we did the interviews, we'd have to do the background checks, the selection, and, finalize the contract. We could even throw in a meet and greet for the final 3 candidates. We do that right here. And, if you want to, slip in the ICMA as part of this process, or we can reduce some of these steps if we decide to go with a, recruiting firm. And I think, I think that's a process that could work, but it's really up to the, the town commission, and we can make some suggestions and have Mr. Hudson come back with a little more detailed flow chart. I think, it's important that we go ahead and, give him some guidance in terms of the questions that he asked in the package, the 4 questions about how it's conducted, how we want to use the Citizens Advisory Committee, do we want to establish the salary range, auto allowance, and I think that was it for the questions. So we ought to at least give him some guidance on that. And other than that, it's really up to, what we'd like to do. Commissioner Fender?
That all sounds great to me, and I'm not passionate anyway. I just in the conversations we've had, it struck a few concepts that I wanted just to articulate. One is that I'm not opposed to a search firm. I am concerned about cost of it, and you alluded to it at the end there. So, cost will be an issue for me. But I think we can certainly make use of that and then find a way to cover it if we have to. Regarding the job description, great prep for this, but also keep in mind that there is an Indeed history out there. Since if we used Indeed in the past, we just have to figure out where that account is, and it's probably going to be super easy to repost with the changes that you want to make. So I don't know if we have those credentials to log back in and see where we left off the last Indeed job posting to make so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then lastly, I was intrigued by your comments about the resident committee, which I'm totally in favor of. And even maybe as far, I don't know how to do this yet, but, when we came down to the interview process, we each interviewed the candidates individually. I wonder if there's some way to cycle the candidates through a resident interview process. And I don't know what that is, whether that's one person brought forward from the community that's part of the interviewing regimen, or having a phase in the interview cycle that allows them to come and make a presentation to a group of residents, just so that there's some actual interaction. But I'm open to hear how that manifests itself, but I think it's an important step in the process, including the last thing you said about the meet and greet, which, to me, that's the informal process, but it seems like we should also include them in a quantitative formal process as well, if it's possible, and there's a way to do it intelligently.
Mr. Kersman?
Yes, I wanted to know if the person that we hire as town manager, can they also be the finance manager built into one? Do they have to have two separate people to do one for finance and one for town manager?
My personal opinion is that's, we pile an awful lot on the town manager as it is. I don't know if we can really ask them to do the finance manager's job as well. I think that's tough, and it's not necessarily the same skill set. Could be, but not necessarily the same skill set. Mr. Fender?
James and Kaya know much more about this than I do, but I recall in the past there was some concept of separation of duties, and we were always getting flagged on it in our audits, and we resolved that problem. I don't know what that means in the terms of your question, but somebody smarter than me can talk about how we can, at a reasonable cost, make sure we maintain that separation of duties.
Yeah, that was a question that somebody asked me, and I told them I don't have an honest answer if it has to be separate or not.
Commissioner Mayfield?
Yes, I'm not certain that it's written anywhere that it has to be separate, but to Commissioner Fender's point, one person with all those duties, all that power is not an ideal business setup, the internal controls and all that stuff. I also will always vote that I think a finance director and a town manager for any municipality is a good idea. I mean, everyone is so concerned with finances, that's number one. And to get someone that knows what they're doing, knows government accounting, knows fund accounting, I can't think of money better spent to have a good person in there, so that when you ask for a number, you're getting the right number. And you know what, it's just way more efficient, and that's my opinion, but I would always vote to have a finance person. In fact, when I first started and it was getting outsourced, I don't think it's working fine now, temporarily, but that's my vision for those positions.
I appreciate it.
Commissioner Campo?
Yeah, the lady that we have helping us now, Holly Vath, has worked with us before. There's a lot that's been said about her hourly fee, but basically she's doing the finance work for $2,400 a month. So I think that's a good value to balance with a manager, and there's a possibility that she could be extended long-term. So I don't think we necessarily have got to fill the finance manager position. I don't think we need to do it prematurely, I guess. And I think it does make sense to have them separated. In order to kind of move along, I'd like to direct staff to have at our next meeting someone from Collins Firm and someone from ICMA, and give us a 5-minute presentation on the pros and cons, and kind of move the ball along, and then we can decide possibly at that meeting. Because again, why I like the search firms is because they have access to people that might not be on the multiple listing service, might be kind of in their back pocket, and that's a tremendous value. The other thing we can ask the search firm is if they had a hybrid model where maybe Dan would be in charge of certain parts of the process. They could get the pocket listings, they could get us the background checks, and then have some of Dan's experience screening, that type of thing. I think you'll find the search firms more flexible than the ICMA. The ICMA, to me, seemed kind of rigid, and when you're getting something for free, it's hard to override that, and I know the HR avatar, I think by the end, they were like, wow, that's cool stuff. We should think about doing that more often. But in the beginning, they were, again, bristling. So I would like to make a motion to direct staff to have a representative from Collins Firm or another search firm, just to articulate the value proposition of a search firm, and someone from ICMA Senior Advisors at our next meeting. So that would be my motion.
I would second the motion with a friendly amendment to ask along with that, that we also include in that the start or the evolution of the time frame of this process, so that when they come and talk, we have just a basic understanding of where we think our milestones are going to be. It doesn't mean we have to lock them in yet, just a draft of the process time schedule.
Okay, I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
Commissioner Mayfield?
Yes, it's not with dates, but I do want to say, that's not what I had buzzed in about, but they do give a kind of timeline in terms of how long it takes, not actual dates, for the ICMA, and then I think a search firm. I think Commissioner Campo's suggestion sounds good. You had that amendment. I would ask our attorney, before, when we got a letter or something about search firms, something I had read, and there was Collins Firm, and then there were at least two that were cheaper, so maybe we could get another person also, maybe, because one was significantly less.
Well, I was going to comment on that. So Palm Springs was also in a similar situation a few months ago. Their manager left. They brought on someone interim, and during that process, unsolicited, they received these 4 proposals that I forwarded on to you. So I think it'd be pretty easy to pick up the phone and call those 4 firms and say, would you like to make proposals to Sewalls Point? And as part of that process, would you consider a hybrid proposal so that you have something in writing before they show up? And you could invite all 4 of them if you want. I mean, it's up to you. You can invite 2 of them, 4 of them. You could look at those 4 and narrow it down. But I know time's of the essence too. So you can also say, bring them all in for 10 minutes each, and we'll interview those 4 people, 4 firms. If 4 respond, maybe only 2 or 3 respond. But that's up to you all, how wide you want to cast that net. Because again, Collins Firm is the most well-known locally. I've worked with them many times over the years. But the Mercer Group is also well-known. They put in, and there were a couple of other firms that put in. So, and as you said, their prices, they varied. I mean, they're probably almost an $8,000 or $10,000 spread when you look at all the cost. I think Benzinger's firm was $28,000 all in. Somebody else might have been $18,000 or $20,000 plus some expenses. And when you add it all up, I think your range was probably like 22 to 28, 29. But if you want, it's easy enough to make those phone calls. Either Dan or I could, make those calls and say, can you make a proposal to Sewalls Point? And they also would like a proposal that if the manager, the interim manager gets involved in the process, what would that do to your proposal?
Just out of curiosity, I don't want to throw a wrench into the gears. In terms of the procurement process, do we have to do anything here? I mean, can we just name somebody here that we want to do this after we talk to them, listen to them for 10 minutes, or?
Yep. Well, in a sense, this is a procurement process, right? You're going to reach out to these firms, and under your purchasing code, this is the kind of professional services you can waive any
so it's almost
procurement issues. So, when it comes to that point, I'd say, waive your procurement process. And it could be a wider net. We could do a short little ad that says, search firms, please apply. But you have 4 right here. And there might be, I don't know, Dan, you might be aware of 1 or 2 other mores. I mean,
really.
these seem to be the main players that you see again and again and again. And so it's no different than the purchasing manager calling for 3 quotes. So one of us is essentially calling for 3 or 4 quotes, but give it to us in a proposal form.
Okay.
Let me maybe restate the motion now that we've got the added
I
wisdom.
was just going to ask you to do that, thank you.
So I'd like to make a motion that we direct staff to contact the 4 search firms and to request a proposal from them that would include a hybrid model that would incorporate the town manager's skills and tasks, and also include a time horizon that a search would take according to their schedule, and along with that, also have the ICMA senior advisor present their game plan for this. And maybe since they're volunteers, we'll put them first up so that they can come and leave. That's only fair. So that would be my motion.
Second.
Okay, see no other comments, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fender,
Aye.
Commissioner Mayfield,
Yes.
Mayor Tompeck,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Kurzman,
Yes.
Commissioner Campbell.
Aye.
Okay, in addition to that, do we want Mr. Hudson to start to put together a little bit of a timeline here? And I'm sorry,
Well, I think as far as the timeline, what I heard you say is the presenters are going to present their timeline, because each depending on the process, will definitely affect the timeline. Okay, so it'll be one thing for range riders and something different for, probably each of the search firms will have different timelines, depending on their availability. So let's relate that to next discussion with the firms, when the firms are here.
That makes sense.
okay.
I can put together a general timeline for you, yeah, just, benchmark dates.
Okay.
My question was going to be timeline for these groups. When do you want them to present at your next meeting on February 22nd? Or is that a little too quick? Do you want them at the meeting after that? How quick, when do you want these proposals in, and when do you want them showing up?
As soon as they have them?
I think we'd like to do it on the 22nd if we could.
Okay.
Sure.
If it's possible.
So I'll reach out to them all tomorrow. I'll coordinate with Dan, and we'll put something out there and have them show up, whoever can show up on the 22nd at 7. And I'll ask them if they can get their proposals in. I know we like to get the agenda out at least a little bit in advance. When would be the deadline for them to get it in? Is it the Thursday before, the 17th?
Thursday, yeah.
So realistically for April, you probably really go on the 16th, give you a day. 24 hours, is that enough? Okay. All right, so I'll ask them for the 16th.
Now, is there, do we want to also start thinking about the Citizens Committee? Do we want to come in here on the 22nd and each one of us have a potential representative picked out? Or at least contact to see if they would like to serve on that committee? It's up to you, I'm just asking the question.
I did my,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Commissioner Mayfield.
Yes. I've thought about the committee, and I have mixed feelings. Like, I know I said this before, I like the idea of the survey, what residents want. I like the idea of the meet and greet, the informal thing. The committee, if that's what the rest of the commission wants, then, that's fine. So I'm just giving you a heads up where I stand on that, and if that's the way the rest of the committee sees fit. Yes, maybe discussion on, did we decide that was the best way, everyone? Yes,
I
at
don't think
point.
we decided, we talked about it a little bit and kind of got some head shakes, but I don't think
Okay.
necessarily got a consensus.
That's what this is for. Yep.
Okay. What does everybody else think? Mr. Kurzman.
Yeah, I'm all for it, only because it lets the community know we want them to be involved, and, they've requested it. We had quite a few voices that requested that. It wouldn't hurt, maybe we could each pick a person that we, from the community, that would be like our liaison, maybe. I don't know how we'd go about it, but that's just a suggestion.
Commissioner Mayfield?
Yes, if we were going to leave this meeting deciding to choose someone, I'd love to be able to say what, I'm sure they're going to ask, how often do I need to do this? What's required of me? If we had some basic idea, 2 meetings, what the time commitment is, I feel like people will ask that.
Okay.
Maybe the town manager can help.
Yes, yeah, I've thought about this a little bit. You want to be careful when we don't use a lot of committees in the town, so you want to be careful. You want to carefully define the parameters. They're going to be reviewing applications, and and not doing background checks. We're going to have somebody else doing background checks. But anyways, I've thought about it. I think it basically would be 3 meetings at the most, 2 or 3. One would be like a general orientation and guidelines, and this is what we're asking you to do. The second would be to kind of go through and do their reviews and their comments and rankings. And then the third meeting would just be to finalize what they've done so far. So that's the way I kind of visualize it myself, so.
Okay, thank you.
And it can probably all be collapsed to within a week to 10 days, probably, I'm thinking.
Okay.
Commissioner Campo?
I think it's a good idea to include citizens, especially in this process. I think the timing of that is probably down the road a little bit. So to name people when they don't know what they're doing and they're circling back, I think it might be premature. I think we want to pick a search firm or ICMA, let them give us the calendar of events, and wait for that to blossom a little bit before we insert them. So.
Commissioner Fender?
So just to your point, Kaya, I sort of feel like, and I don't care when we do it, but I feel like some of the issues we had in the last cycle with the town manager, and maybe some of the outcry that forced the issue a little bit, was that some residents don't feel like they're part of the process, right? And so I sort of feel like the message to the new incoming town manager, the subtle psychology of the hiring process, and you heard me sort of ask the questions to the interim town managers as they were being interviewed, is that they realize that part of the constituency, probably the most important part of the constituency, is their interaction with residents, not with us. I mean, I felt like the previous town manager spent a lot of time talking to us when I really wanted her appeasing her and our customers, right? Or
Right.
I think this is a town of residents, and the residents need to be part of that, have to embrace the new town manager. And the new town manager, more importantly, needs to understand that their job is to make the residents happy, not to make us happy, right? That's just my philosophy on this. I don't care how we do it, and I just think they need to be involved in some way. And by the way, they've always been involved in this process. We've never excluded the residents from the past hiring processes. And I wouldn't expect us to exclude them this time either. The question is at what level and how to make it happen. And I'm not passionate about how we do it, by the way, as long as they feel included in the decision. And so they can also embrace the town manager and start that person on a positive note, for success.
Vice Mayor?
This way, at the end of the day, if the community is involved, the town manager knows that they were also picked by not just the staff, but the community as well. It was almost, in a sense, unanimous when you look at it, and I think it's a good feeling when you're sitting in the chair of being the town manager. Not only did the commission pick you, but, the residents of the town had a voice in it. And I think it goes a long way. And it shows that we're acting more as a community, that the community is involved, and it's going to be a new definition going forward, and it's something that we could use as a foundation as we grow and have more community input. I think it's going in the right direction then, if we should do that.
Commissioner Campo?
I think there's a consensus that we want the public to be involved, and that the timing of their involvement and the purpose might be determined at a later point. So if that is the consensus, I wanted to take a slight pivot and discuss something else regarding citizen boards. And I'd like to maybe suggest that we have it on the next workshop meeting, but I wanted to bring it up now since we're talking about citizen advisory boards. And that is, the more, as we've discussed before, the more of our citizens that are involved in the government, the more trust we build. I think we're in the process of rebuilding some trust from a number of, past meetings. And we have some ambitious goals ahead with capital improvement projects, which bring with it change. It's a scary word, change. And the more people that are around town hall that are invested and have skin in the game, the greater the outreach and the more the trust. So something that I would like to have at our next workshop meeting is to break apart and decouple the LPA from the town commission. Other commissions have two separate boards. Now that we've got a new comprehensive plan in the works, we've just begun the process. We have to do the LDRs, we have to respond to the state. This is a whole nother exercise, and it's going to become a living, breathing process that's going to be challenged, and to have the expertise, the institutional knowledge of a body that can help with that process, I think would be greatly appreciated and necessary, because it's going to really involve not just esoteric, book that you put in the shelf, but how you live your life, and especially with some of these new things that have not been affected before. So I would like to discuss the decoupling of the LPA from the town commission, and I'd also like to throw out that if there are folks that like to be involved with the process, then Mayor Mayfield had brought up the possibility of another board, which we're not using, and that's the Charter Review Board. Our charter has not been reviewed for, I think, over 20 years, and there's a provision within it that says it needs to be reviewed every 10 years. There's been some issues that have been brought up, such as who can be an elected official. Is it someone that has just moved in last week? It could be my high school that's taking courses at IRSC, or maybe someone at the University of Florida that wants to run for my office, or residency requirements. There's a lot of things that have changed. So there are boards that have already had a place within our governing that we might not have fully utilized, that we could fully utilize. And we could start off creating new boards with no infrastructure, but since we have a call in our charter, there is a call for a charter review committee every 10 years. We haven't used that. We've got a lot of infrastructure for the LPA that's already in place. And I think what a great place to have a feeder for future town commissioners who could have experience working with the government, so that we have a succession plan. So I'd like to have a topic maybe at our meeting in March on, expanding those, decoupling the LPA from the town commission, and discussing a charter review process. While we're on that topic, I thought I'd throw that up.
Commissioner Mayfield?
Yeah, just quick comment on that. I'm all on board for a charter review committee, and I love the idea of well-run committees, part of the government. I think that's excellent. I love citizen involvement. I just think they need to be, well-run, and we have the staff to manage them appropriately. And just a heads up for the Citizen Advisory Committee for the process. I'm like I said, I have mixed feelings. You don't have to sell me on it. I mean, if you guys are into it, I'm good with it too. I just think about how the charter said, the commission hires the manager, and I just, so there's really I'm good with it, whatever you guys decide. But I love the idea of a charter review committee. I think that's a great idea.
I have been thinking about the, Citizens Advisory Committee, because I think that's something that's relatively easy to set up. And Glenn, I think there's a difference between a committee and a board, isn't there? For some reason, we couldn't have a board where it had to be a committee, and I'm not sure what the distinction was, but.
Yeah, generally, a committee is what's commonly referred to in the municipal world when you appoint a citizens committee. They're going to be subject to the Sunshine Law, of course. That's the biggest issue, and usually the first meeting, I'll give them a short presentation on that. And, the charter review process is usually a few months. I mean, I've done this 2 or 3 times in the last year. Different cities have had the charter review process, and you have the citizens committee, and you review the charter, and sometimes the commission provides guidance, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes the commission say, well, we really want you to look at sections 1, 7, 11. And sometimes the commission say, no, we'd like you to review. You still review the whole thing, but these are our focuses. Or sometimes you simply say, okay, we want you to go through the entire charter and give us suggestions. And then ultimately, the commission will review those suggestions and then make your own choices as to whether you accept all of those recommendations, tweak them, don't accept some of them. So it's usually a several-month process. Usually the committee's a 2 to 3 month process to go through a charter. Because most committees of citizens, I've learned it, they really want to go through every line. They want to read every line, and there's a lot of lines in a charter, and a lot of the lines may be obsolete a long time ago. And then they're going to make different suggestions as to changes.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you, Commissioner Campo, that it may be premature to talk about that for this thing right now, but something to keep in the back of your mind and think about people that might be interested. Okay, Mr. Hudson, do you have, did you get some clear, direct, concise direction here, or do you know which steps to take moving forward?
Yeah, I think the committee will wait until after we've heard from the search firms and then come back to you later with some couple of options for that. Did you want to talk about the salary range potential for the manager at this time?
Well, I think, we talked about, I think we've gotten through item 1 on the questions that you had.
Yeah,
And, well,
1
we
and
talked
2.
about item 2, so I
Yeah.
think we could, what's the commission's pleasure on questions 3 and 4?
Since you're asking.
Commissioner Mayfield?
I know with the prior town manager, we had 128,000 was where we had ended her contract or given it to her to consider. I think that seems reasonable when we have these projects going on, the grant management, we're talking about these committees, and, we have a small staff. I think that we want to not go too low like we did before, but we certainly want to spend our money wisely.
Does that mean you concur with the range of 110 to 140?
I kind of felt like the town manager was looking for a little bit more, 110 to 140 is broad, right? 30,000, that's a big,
It's not as broad as some I've seen, but it's
I don't think we should put 140 on there.
yeah, I don't,
Nobody has
yeah,
intention
what you
of
don't
ever
want to
paying
have
it.
happen is, you don't want to have somebody thinking, walking in the door, they're getting 140,000. What you want to do is you're setting kind of like a future vision for the town, saying, if I come to the town and work here and stay here 5 years and 10 years, that there is room to grow over the course of time. Of course, that's always subject to the commission's decision-making. So you may want to narrow it down a little bit and just say, we expect to hire within a range of, I'm just going to throw out a number like 110 to 120 as like the range you expect it to be hired at. So that's an option
And
that some
sometimes-
places do.
Sometimes that range reflects the relative experience of the candidate, too. If it's somebody who's relatively inexperienced, they might be closer to the 110 as opposed to somebody who's 10, 15 years' experience might be in the 125, 130. Vice Mayor Kurtzman.
Yes, I was also I got a summary and salary of key benefits for different towns with small populations like ours. What I did, though, I was more interested in seeing the population of the different towns that were there, because I went on the internet. Golden Beach, they pay their town manager $203,000, a population of 659. Gulf, they pay $108.50, but their population is 251 residents. Hillsborough Beach, 1,700, population, 130,000. Indian Shores, 1,189 people, 107,000. Jupiter Colony Inlet, 80,000, but they have a population of 381 people. Then we have Manalapan, 303 residents, 140,000. Meganya Park, it's right next to Belle Glade, so I'm assuming that it's a low-income area, and the median income is very low, and they pay their town manager $89,000. Ocean Ridge, 1,500 population, they pay their town manager $112,000. Let me see, and I know one of them also has an assistant manager too, that I was looking at. South Palm Beach, 1,300 people, and they pay $100,000. And then we have Ocean Ridge, 1,500 people, 112,000. So it's just, there's different things. I mean, we have notes in there, but it just,
Where did this chart come from?
it was in our packet.
Town
No, I
manager,
know, but who-
town manager. Town
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
it was extracted from a Florida League of Cities, the most current survey, which is 2020. So it's a little bit dated, too.
Well, I'm hard pressed to look at this chart and come up with any real answers. You want to know the truth, it's all over the place.
Let's go with the range, one
Yeah,
through 140.
yeah, I think the range is good, okay. What about is there any other comments on the salary range?
I feel like that's a little wide, but that's just my opinion. I feel like we'll be bickering over that again on hiring night about, what we did before.
Maybe we go down to 130?
Well, can I jump in? I think a 110 town manager who is maybe not as experienced in finance, that requires an $80,000 finance director, would work. I think if someone comes in and says, look, I've been the finance director of West Palm Beach, so we might be able to have your current finance arrangement, and I don't need a high-powered, expensive finance person. I think that range could help, so that during the interview process, it would allow us to hire someone that doesn't have the finance experience at the lower end of the range, so that we might have to then expect, okay, we're going to have to come up with a different arrangement for the finance. Versus if someone with the finance experience says, listen, I've checked out the situation, you're currently paying $30,000 a year with your finance, I'm comfortable with that. Then, but I want 140,000. I think this range allows us both ends of the spectrum. And because we've had two prior managers that have felt the need to have a strong finance person close to them, I think that's something that we need to keep in mind, and something I'm very sensitive to as well, because I think it kept us in an awkward situation. And, I'll just keep it at that.
Commissioner Fender?
So my position is not going to be the popular one here, or even the one that I would expect anybody to follow, but I hire a lot of people, and I consider the psychology of the hiring process, right? When I hire somebody, I want to make sure they're excited about being in the role that they're getting. So I actually never post a price. I never post a salary amount for my little business, right? I put their expectation on the application and let them tell me what they want to make. And that way I know, right, I first look at the application that this person's not within my budget, or, wow, this person is either too low for my budget, or, I get a sense of where they need to be psychologically. I'm fine choosing a range, but I would say my goal would be to tighten up the range, because also on the psychology of it, because if I'm interviewing, I'm going to be one hired at the top of the range. If I see a range of 110 to 140 and you hire me to 110, I'm like, what's that about? You obviously have the budget to pay me 140, so why aren't you? I don't know, I'm just telling you about the psychology of being hired, not what we as a town want to pay, right? So I would say, if your budget says we're going to pay this person $128,000 a year, I think you advertise the role at $128,000 a year. I personally put nothing and let them tell me what they would want and see what the market will bear. But again, I'm not suggesting we do that. I'm just telling you that's the opposite opinion of a wide range.
Commissioner Mayfield?
Yes. I just want to avoid some of the problems we had. We started out at 97,000, I believe, for the first go-round in June or July 2019, and that was just too low. And I only think that it's become more of a employees market. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I don't think it's, gotten easier to hire people. And then I think we went up to 110. To my point that I said before, I would like to want to make sure we hire the best person at the most reasonable cost and avoid the situation, in that moment of hiring where I feel like if we could get on some page of what we would be willing to pay for the highly qualified town manager, like, I would say 120 to 130 sounds like a reasonable range for the highly qualified town manager that can do all those things. And I'm afraid that, and I'm not going to keep fighting this, but 110 to 140, I think we might set ourselves up for some hiring issues with that.
Mr. Fender?
Just one more point on this, is that some of the angst of the outgoing town manager is her request for a pretty rich pay increase, which rubbed people the wrong way. I think that we have a budget, and what I tried to explain to the people who were talking to me about their concern about offering that kind of raise, and at first I said doubtful that raise would ever happen. But the next thing I said is that worst case scenario is you're going to lose your town manager and you're going to have to hire a new one, and it's going to be an expensive proposition. So not only are you going to have to pay a higher salary on the new person coming in, you're going to have to pay all the search costs to hire that person. So again, I would go back to what's our budget? What did we allocate in payroll for the last town manager, and how far in excess or at that rate are we willing to go in a sense of, hey, this is the budget, this is what we agreed to pay, this is how we built our budget, and this is what the townspeople also expect to pay a town manager and are frustrated if you pay them more. Because the whole reason that they kind of pushed back was that they didn't want to pay the salary increase that she wanted, and now you're going to hire somebody at that rate. And so the whole discussion was a moot point, which I kind of alluded to them early on, but the point is, I would try to stick to the budget if you can.
Mr. Torcivia?
You're going to be having search firms come in and do a presentation. I see a couple of paths. One, you could put in the letter to them what your range is, or you could simply ask them during the interview process what they suggest as a range.
Great idea. Get our money's worth out of them.
I mean, they do this for a living. They should know what the market is out there for a town manager in this part of Florida for this.
I mean, we have 128,000 as the average. I feel like they're going to go to this. That's what they've done before, is look at the, right?
I would be surprised if you didn't get a range of between 120 and 140 myself, but I'm not in that business because, we're all looking at these same criteria. We're all aware of the economy for employees has increased dramatically. Heck, it wasn't that long ago that $15 an hour was an aspirational goal. And now I go by and I see McDonald's, $15 an hour. And that's,
Can you give me that number?
yeah, I know.
Commissioner
That's for a
Camp?
volunteer.
Yeah, I still think it's a package deal. I think when you talk to someone about a town manager and she says, look, I'm a little weak in this area, I need $80,000, so I think it's a package deal. So when you're talking about the range, you could say, this is our arrangement, this is our qualifications of the person that's doing the monthlies, the quarterlies, helping the auditor. Are you able to work with that? And if they say no, then they go to the lower end of the scale. If they say yes, and 3 months after they're hired, they're like, well, I want to bring my buddy in, and I want to pay him $86,000, then, there's a problem. So I think we need to look at the package of both of those when we're looking at the range.
Vice Mayor Chris?
Yeah, I think all three commissioners over here have brought up good points on all ends. But the thing is, we're going to have to look at, one thing nobody brought up is the ability of writing grants. And one of the last things that I know that our prior town manager did, she wrote a grant got us $3.4 million out of the $4.4 million that we need for Phase 3, which leaves only $1 million deficit. And that supposed big tax increase that we were going to have is almost satisfied. By the time we do that now, and by the time maybe we sell the lot on Heritage, we're talking maybe $400,000 gap at the end of the day. So I think we can't overlook grants. That's very important. I think whoever comes in as a town manager, I would like him to have experience in writing grants and looking up and following through. And
That's an excellent point, but we do have an excellent grant writer.
Who's in the house?
yes. How you doing? Grants are important. They really are.
Commissioner Fender?
I can't remember what I was going to say, scratch it.
Commissioner Mayfield?
Yeah, I agree, Commissioner, or Vice Mayor Kurzman. There's a grant writing, but then there's a grant management, which is, I believe, a little bit of a separate thing that I would really hope that our new town manager would be qualified, to your point, to keep up with all the paperwork. I'm slightly concerned about grouping together the town manager with the finance director. That's, when you talk about the package, Commissioner Campo, I'm not saying that's wrong, but I feel like this is a new angle that I haven't thought about. I mean, it's like we have the job description for the town manager, which includes, yes, I agree, a healthy, that's why we chose, that was the edge for our interim town manager, the knowledge of it, but the day-to-day execution, I don't, that's not something that I envision skimping on, or if you can save me money in that area, then I'm just putting that out there. I have, as I said a little bit ago, I think there are two separate positions. I think you could get a well-qualified part-time worker that would still be fiscally responsible for the finance. So that makes me a little nervous to try to group it all together. I'm just putting that out there.
Makes me a little nervous, too. And I'm wondering, if you think about grouping them together, do you need to include in the town manager job description that we'd really like a CPA, we'd really like somebody that has GFOA credentials or experience, and you're not doing that. So I think it's dangerous to,
Yeah.
I think it's dangerous to group them together.
What I was referring to is when you negotiate the end of the range. If it's 110 to 140, and someone says, this is the experience that I bring to the table, but I'm a little shy on the finance experience, then you might think, well, then we're going to have to spend more money in that department. So I'm not talking about a package deal. I'm just saying
Okay.
we need to figure out how much,
Yeah.
we're offering.
That's fine, and we can certainly make that allowance with the 110 to 140 range we have here, I
Right,
think.
right.
Okay.
I think Glenn's got a great suggestion, and we've got kind of a working range. And
Okay.
can I just add one thing? We should remember, it's not just what they're receiving, okay? It's what we're paying, and the town is paying. Health insurance, if they have dependents, is $30,000 a year, okay? And the pension is 15%, so that's another 15 to 20,000.
17%, isn't it?
I think it's 15, yeah. So by the time you take, 30 and 15, and you add, you're talking some, you're approaching $200,000. So we've got to think of those extra costs as well.
All right, so Glenn, you will take the next step on that and talk to the recruiting firm about?
Right, so I've got two letters that I've been outlining here, one to the 4 search firms, one to the ICMA, both inviting them to submit something and attend the meeting on February 22nd. And I don't think I need to mention to them to include a salary proposal. I would think that you can ask them that at the commission meeting. And is a 10-minute presentation each about what you want? 'Cause that's what I was going to put in the letter, 10 minutes?
Yeah, no longer.
No longer?
If there's 4 of them, I felt like that.
Okay.
We have to allow time for the seagrass presentation.
And do we have any other comments or on the auto allowance?
No, sir, I think hearing the conversation tonight, we can postpone that to later.
Okay, great. Okay, I think that does it for item 7A. Next item is 7B, marine structure potential language changes. And Jack is going to lead us through that.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the docks and also seagrass.
Good.
Not really.
We were jonesing for it. We need some more.
But what I really want to show you a little bit is, I'll just briefly go over the packet that you have there. You got some material there from the DEP. It shows what their requirements are and what I look at compared to what is submitted. First off, a person would have to first make application with the DEP and get approval through them. And then, once they get the approval, that's when I then review it. And what I look at is the actual structure, how it's actually manufactured, basically, or how it's prescribed to be manufactured, and make sure that that coincides with the building code. And then I'll do the inspection based on that, and also what the DEP regulates as far as the spacing of the planks and whatnot. As far as the covered boat dock. The way the DEP once said is that they were regulating it at one time because of the seagrass. Now, because they claim that there aren't any areas that have that seagrass, they really don't have an opinion on it right now. So when I went to get their opinion, I got crickets. So what I wanted to show you is on one of our slides that I presented was there was a little bit of confusion as to the height restriction and how that is determined based on where you live, based on the elevation of your home. And what it basically says is that, now let me get a little closer so I can read it. It says, the plans are engineered so that the roof will be constructed of, okay, thank you. The roof will be constructed of materials in a manner in which probably withstand winds of 160 miles per hour as specified by the building code. And those are the parts that I have to pick up on after the DEP is done doing their cursory reviews. And all docks will be pitched, of course now, and hipped or gabled design. And then also there's a height restriction. And that seems to be the issue that we're having, because anybody can do the roof, but because of your elevation, you may not be allowed to do a roof. And here's a good example of somebody that lives on one side of the town where they're on the ridge. You can see the finished grade to the right, and that's you take the mean finished grade and you go straight out, let's say, and you can't be any higher than that finished grade. So if you're way up high, you can have your 15-foot roof top over your dock, according to the ordinance. But that shaded yellow area, that's a restricted area. You can't, so if that roof were 16 feet, it would more than likely intrude into that yellow area. If you see the next slide, there's an example of the other side of town where they're lower lying. A lot of them are in the flood zone, and in that, if they were to go ahead and put a roof over their dock, they would then be in that restricted area. So the way that the ordinance is written is that anybody that basically lives on this other side of town,
The Indian River.
I'm sorry, the Indian River,
Right.
would then not be allowed to put a roof or a cover over their dock, because it would be in that restricted area. So part of the ordinance is, okay, well, we could eliminate the height restriction, let's say. If you just did that could work, but then it also could create other issues. If you remove that, you'd be like, well, what's it matter if those docks on the Indian River are quite a ways out? And if somebody puts a cover over their dock, it's really not going to obstruct anybody's view because it's way out. But then by removing that one part of the ordinance, you may create a mess on some of the houses that live on the canals or on the island or the Samara, because those docks are right up against their seawalls. So then if you allowed and say, oh, we take the height restriction away, now you've got a roof structure over a dock that's up against a seawall that's right outside somebody's backyard, right across the canal. So that might create a whole nother issue. The other issue is that if you would allow the docks, or I'm sorry, the covers, you may want to allow them and then put a restriction on what type they could have. For example, there's some photos in here of some aluminum ones with the canvas. And those seems like the ones that other areas have been allowing lately, because they're less intrusive. The supporting columns are very thin, so they're not going to be obstructing anybody's view this way. But the downside of that is that the canvas top on top, if you don't regulate, let's say, the color of it, you just say, okay, everybody can have this aluminum cover, boat cover, with a canvas top. You might get somebody that wants a purple one next door to somebody with a yellow one or an orange one. And then you look down the river and you've got a whole carnival of tents going up over there. So that would be the downside of that. Like I said, the plus side of that is that it's not as it doesn't block as much view as, say, if you were to say, go ahead and build one, and then your columns are going to be as wide as could be, and it would block everything.
Can I interrupt you? Is there any restriction on the west side in terms of the enclosures right now?
You're not permitted to enclose them, but you are allowed to have a roof over them.
Okay, so is there any restrictions or architectural requirements for the roof?
There is not, except that it withstands
Or color.
165 mile an hour winds.
Okay.
As
So
long as it's above the finished grade.
as long as it's, well, below the finish.
Or below, I mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. So, and I just recently had one that was built on the west side that was over, and I had to knock them down, and because now they're getting these larger boats, and they want to put them on a boat lift and lift them up inside that area. But when they have the center console and everything like that, that's going to hit the ceiling of the cover. So that they had to make do and alter that, so it would fit in there. The other issue, well, not issue, but one of the other solutions may be to, instead of trying to tweak this ordinance to try to fit it in so that, you know, this person can have it, you're always going to create another problem, because if you allow it, just say the river on your dock extends so far out, you'll be allowed to have this type or whatever. You're going to have that other person that's in an area that, hey, what about me? My dock is against the seawall. I would like one. So if you give that one, then and it goes on down. Well, if he got one, I want one. So the alternative might be just to remove the restriction that you do have in this ordinance that does not allow them to go before the Planning and Zoning Board. This way it would be a case-by-case basis. And this way they would, you'd have your chance to hear what they are going to put in place. You could hear from the residents that it may, you know, bother them or may not. But they would have their chance to offer their voice on that. Otherwise, if you were to try to tweak this ordinance, you're going to make some people happy, of course, and you're going to make others not so happy. But
You know, I think the reason that we've been torturing ourselves with seagrass presentations and some other things over the last 4 or 5 months is specifically because we had originally talked about the fact that it seemed unfair to the people on the east side of the peninsula, because none of them could really have any kind of an enclosure on the dock just because of the level of the property, whereas on the west side, they had a lot more chance to put one. And if the commission, but I understand what you're saying in terms of if you open it up there, then you open it up at other places too, which we may not want to do. And I don't know I don't know what the rest of the commissioners think on this, obviously, but I'd sure like to hear your views if we want to pursue this, leave it as it is, or to, come up with some kind of a hybrid solution. Commissioner Fender?
So I liked your comments about the carnival tent look avoidance. I'm less worried about the fairness of this, St. Lucie side versus Indian River side. But I think you could probably give some leeway. And also, I'm not so concerned about hey, it's not fair because my dock is only up against the seawall. I would say, if you wanted to give any latitude at all, rather than opening up entirely, like you said, because to me, it's a slippery slope, because everybody's going to come before the board and say, well, I'd like to do this, and here's how it's going to look great, please let me, and pretty soon, you do have the carnival effect, although maybe, I'm not passionate about that. Although I would say that having a written ordinance of what the restriction is valid, and you have one, you might be able to make it more palatable to adhere to the spirit of the ordinance, which is not to block people's views, is to say that based on, I'm using this number, and I don't know what the number is, every 100 feet of dock, you can go up a foot or something, or maybe it's after 200 feet, you're able to have, a 8-foot height restriction. The idea is to be able to allow them to cover their boat, or obviously make a small boathouse out there if that's what they're doing. And then I would think that you would also stipulate a color scheme, right? It would be natural wood products or basic colors like white canvas or brown, I don't know. Just my thought. I sort of think you're on a slippery slope of just allowing everybody to come before the board.
Vice Mayor Kurzman?
Yeah, we just went through multiple presentations, plus former Mayor Thurlow's explanation on this, and it would be a disservice, I guess, because we do have a lot of manatee in the Indian River Lagoon. I've never seen them in the St. Lucie in that area. Maybe, I'm sure they're there, but I just haven't seen them. But I've seen them plenty of times in Indian River Lagoon, and they do depend on the seagrass, and anything that could hurt seagrass at this point, after the presentations we've received, I'm against. And anything that's going to damage our ecosystem or hurt the manatees, I'm not in favor of. And I'm going to stand strong on that.
Commissioner Mayfield?
Yeah, Jack, what is allowed? I know you said no pitch, or the pitch has to be a certain way. What is allowed right now in our code with the canvas and aluminum boat covers, boat roofs?
It
Dock, yeah,
doesn't have anything against it,
okay.
because it's not flat. It would just have to then meet the wind, the
Okay.
170 mile an hour wind load.
And so that's normal for a canvas and aluminum, a canvas and aluminum, I think there's one, I think I can see that.
There's like 3 of them in town.
And they're built to withstand 100, you have to take off the canvas or the canvas stays on it?
The canvas is supposed to be removed,
Okay.
from what I'm told,
Okay. I have a hard time believing that
but
with
it
sand.
will more than likely be removed,
Okay.
whether it's by you or by the wind. But
Okay, so when it says it's approved, it just means the aluminum poles will
correct, that's what
withstand
I'm
it.
saying. More than likely, the aluminum will stay, but the canvas.
Okay, so you're supposed to
after
take that. Okay, that makes more sense. That,
Go on.
that makes some sense. And I also want to clarify that I think some of the impetus to be here was that there were 2 docks that are non-conforming
At least,
right now.
right.
And they don't have they never got the permit to do it, or there was okay.
Correct.
Which I think is a bit of an issue. And then there's somebody who's trying to do it correctly, but is in limbo, kind of waiting to see what's going to happen.
It happens to be somebody that's on a seawall. And so that's the whole issue that they're bringing up. Well, I'd like to protect my boat too, because other people can protect theirs, but I can't. And that's where the restricted area falls into play.
When we first had this discussion, and to Vice Mayor's point with the presentations, I too was like, well, if the dock covers are going to hurt, if the boat covers are going to hurt the seagrass, then we shouldn't do it. But if DEP is really the one regulating it, and they weren't letting it before because of the seagrass, and now they are, I'm not sure that I'm better qualified to say that they should at the expense of all the people that want to have boat covers. But I also had a conversation, I think it could get tricky if we tried to fix this, then it would take some time, because you and I had a discussion. I think it's important to differentiate the canal and archipelago.
Correct.
Because I do not think that people there would want their neighbors to have any kind of boat cover. It's very close. It's all, so I think it would require some, I don't know, community input or some kind of crafting of some ordinance that would, put zone, you're on the St. Lucie zone, you're on the Indian River zone, you're on the canal zone, you're in the archipelago, to allow you to do that. So,
I did happen to stop one builder from about 6 months ago, was starting to construct a covered boat dock in the archipelago.
okay,
And had to put a cease and desist, and they did take it down.
okay.
And it did cause quite a stir from the area. It wasn't,
From the other residents or from
the other residents.
Okay, yeah.
They didn't even get they just started that way before I was alerted on it. So
Okay, yeah.
it didn't take much.
So I'm open to trying to make it work for the people that it's not that big a deal, but I do think it would be a trickier ordinance to craft, given all the factors that come into it.
Vice Mayor Kurzman?
Yeah, you mentioned that there's 2 docks that were built with no permits. What are we doing legally about that? Anything, or?
Well, it's not the docks that were built, it's the covered, they never asked for permission to put the boat covers on the dock.
Were they taken down?
No, they're still standing to this day. They've been there from what I understand. I don't know how long actually they've been there, but they've been there since I started here. So I don't know how long they've been there, because there's no record of them permitting them. So who knows how many years before I was here that those covers were in place. When I asked the DEP, they acknowledged that they're there and that they did not give them permission for those covers.
At this point, can we make them take them down?
Well, that was what I was holding off to see what the commission's ruling was on this, whether because it wouldn't make any sense for me to then cite them, have them remove it when there's a possibility that they may be allowed. So we wanted to get a resolution to this thing first, so that if there's a direction that you want to tell me, no, let's go ahead and pursue that, I'll definitely go right ahead and send a letter out to let them know that they're in violation of the ordinance. But if there was a possibility that they may be allowed because of the distance that they are from the shoreline, well, then it would make a little bit more sense to just stand off and wait and see what you decide to do.
Commissioner Fender?
I'm just curious about, this diagram that we're looking at now implies a boathouse or a structure on top of a dock. But, and the spirit of the ordinance, I believe, is against blocking residents' views of the water. But the reality is in most docks, let's pretend that house, that structure was not in this diagram. Most have boat lifts, and those boat lifts, when you lift your boat up, it's higher than that finished grade property line. So I'm confused by what constitutes blocking of a view. Obviously there's some aesthetic to both a structure and a boat, hopefully. Not the carnival look, but a professional, well-engineered structure that, by the way, I think is above that. All docks, I would guess, that have lifts are above the finished grade of that property. I'm only thinking of the Indian River Lagoon side.
You do make a good point that the boats, once lifted, do block the view, of course, depending on the size of your boat. But I think that that's to be expected. I think people expect to see a boat on the end of a dock, so it's not unusual. I think it's unusual when they do see a cover on it versus all the other ones without covers, and I think that's the odd part of it.
Commissioner Mayfield?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I thought that when former Mayor Jackie Thurlow-Lippisch had said the reasoning was the seagrass for the no covers. I think that obviously the view probably came into play too, but I believe that is what was said before and what sparked all the seagrass discussion. Like I said, I bet there's view also, but I think that was the reason that we were told, if you guys remember correctly? Okay.
And I think, I mentioned it before, that if we decided to, make some modifications so that the people on the east side could put up an enclosure, that we could certainly put a little additional permit fee for seagrass mitigation or something like that. I've asked Lori Simpson, the lady who did the presentation the last meeting, or meeting before last, and I'd like to know if there's a place that does it, locally, because we obviously want the mitigation to be local. And we could add that in there too. But I think what I'm hoping that we can come to some kind of consensus here is to at least direct staff to maybe to put some verbiage together to allow folks on the east side of the peninsula to add enclosures within certain guidelines, and maybe we can modify it in such a manner so that we exclude the canals and the archipelago and that kind of thing. If that's what you feel, if you don't feel that the people on the east side should have the ability to put an enclosure, well, that's fine. Then we really don't have to change anything as far as I can see. But if you feel that they should have some chance to do that, then we need to make the modification to the to the language. Commissioner Fender?
I was just going to say, at the first part of your comments, you almost took the words right out of my mouth. I am incredibly sensitive to the issue of the seagrass and the manatees, but it seems to me that the impact to the seagrass of these dock structures is insignificant compared to the damage to the seagrass by actual boat usage in general. And it seems like if we could have the dock owners mitigate seagrass in general, it would be their responsibility to help us with the seagrass problem by continuing to both put into a mitigation fund and also actual planting seagrass around their property, right? So I feel like there's a way to get both accomplished, to live in harmony with the environment and also maintain our dock and cover structures and also mitigate the seagrass problem that we have, not entirely caused by the docks, but caused by the overuse of our waterways and the runoff and pollution issues that we're having. So, I don't know.
Commissioner Mayfield?
Yeah, my thought train was from another comment. I think you were saying that if we don't want the change, then we are essentially saying that the code needs to be enforced, correct? For the other two owner, like we need to follow through on our codes. And then the other person who's waiting would be told no, correct? I just want to clarify that. That being said, I would be open to changing it, like I said, with a specifically worded ordinance to protect the canal areas, probably in the archipelago, because I can't imagine boat covers in that area.
Commissioner Fender?
And I would probably go one step back, based on my last comment, and say that, our forefathers who wrote our ordinances did so with a great deal of thought and visibility. I'm not against change, but I don't know that change is warranted. And so your original comment was, hey, if we do nothing, there are people who in violation who did something against our ordinances and they should be enforced. So, while I'm a lover of the ocean and a huge sailor, I'm not sure that it's my role just to change on a whim. And I respect the commissioners who came before me who put these ordinances in place for a reason. And I believe, and I'm not unimpressed with the view of the waterway that I have as a 20-year resident. So I'm not compelled personally to change the ordinance, even though, I could be convinced. I would say enforce the ordinance in place.
Vice Mayor Kurzman?
I support everything Commissioner Fender just said 100%. And I agree with him on that. I think we should just leave it alone, and it's for the sake of the environment. I mean, the waters here aren't getting any better, and I'm not looking to destroy seagrass. We've just had more manatees dying in a year than the history of any other year before. I think that's more important than allowing somebody to say, wow, look at my boathouse, or whatever you want to call it. It's not worth it. The trade-off, I'm not going to go for it. Absolutely not. I want to leave things the way they are, and I want it strictly enforced.
Commissioner Campo, you haven't chimed in. You must have some
You know
thoughts.
about
like-
seagrass now.
I mean, the thought may be, why are we talking about this again? I'm not sure what your thoughts are, but we'd like to hear them.
I think you all are doing a great job, and I've got nothing to add.
So no position one way or the other?
Correct.
That's unbelievable.
Okay.
It's the new me.
Commissioner Mayfield?
Yes, I know I'd spoken up and saying I would support the change. I'm not going to fight for this change. I haven't heard from the residents, in particular. They haven't reached out to I'm not saying that they should, meaning this just kind of came before us, and it seems logical if these, they should have, people love their boats. Like, I understand the concept of wanting to protect it and wanting to have a roof like the others, so I'm totally in with that, but I'm not going to, if we're not getting a lot of consensus and there's not a lot of discussion, I'm not going to.
Okay, I don't think we have a strong consensus for moving forward with making changes to the ordinance for the east side, so I guess we'll let it
Can I add one comment?
die the natural death, except that do we wish to do anything in terms of the people that already have one on the east side is really the question. Commissioner Fender?
I just want to commend the building official on his very clear and articulate presentation on this issue, though. So I appreciate this diagram, because it's so simple and easy to understand. So thank you for. You're welcome.
It is appreciated.
Agreed.
Okay, Commissioner Mayfield?
Yeah, I don't like to say it, but I think that if you're not in code and these are our enforcements or these are our codes, then we need to enforce properly. I mean, it's painful, but it's true, they didn't get a permit the way they were supposed to, so.
All right, very good. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
Okay, down to item 8, commission and staff closing comments. Mr. Hudson?
Just to make you aware, I've heard comments about the FPL tree trimming from time to time, and they have been in the office since I've been here saying that they're preparing to do the tree trimming in the canopy, so I'm not sure.
Can we lay our bodies across the road and?
I think that would be allowed, yeah. No, seriously, I don't know what latitude we have to get in the way of it, but I did want to make sure that you were aware of it, so.
It seems like they're doing it a lot more often than they used to. It's incredibly frustrating.
It also seems like they're cutting a much wider swath, and the way they're doing it, the other places I've seen around town, it's just really just been butchered, I mean, in some cases. There's one along A1A that I drive by every day, where there's just, literally just the trunk of a tree left.
Yeah, it's horrible what they've done.
Commissioner Fender?
So this is a hot button issue for me. I'm glad you brought it up, Ms.
Yeah.
Johnson. We actually have a new resident in the town of Sewalls Point who is the replacement for the community liaison at FPL. I think he lives on the north side. Right before you allow anybody to come in for whatever they were in your office to ask for permission to, I would hope, and I'm asking you to tell them no for now, but to have that gentleman who is the community liaison, invite him to our next meeting, have him come to the dais, and let's establish a rapport with this wonderful young man, because I've talked to him on the phone, he's a super guy. There was conversations with the previous town manager about spending $1,500 to take the overhead wiring under that section of canopy, and it was incredibly inexpensive to get the design drawn up, and the end of it was going to be about the same expense as our playground. So in order to let that canopy grow back, I'm willing to do a lot. So let's at least push back on allowing them to do any more cutting for now, because it seems like they've cut more lately than they have in previous 10 years that I've been here, to get the community liaison to at least come before us and understand our concerns.
I have no problem with asking the community liaison to come in. Don't think for a second you're going to tell FPL they can't cut. End of discussion.
Yeah.
Right.
They will not listen to you, and
What did I say?
I said, it's FPL.
they're not going to, they are directed by the Public Service Commission to do this. They are not going to listen to you say, no, you can't cut that tree.
I would just ask them to compare our canopy to the old St. Lucie canopy on the way to Sanskrit Park and ask, what is the difference and why are they able to maintain theirs the way they do, and what are we doing wrong with the maintenance of our canopy?
I thought we'd had a brief discussion about maybe us doing the trimming around that particular area ourselves,
We did.
us hiring somebody to come in and do that. And I think that's a plausible alternative, but telling FPL they can't cut is not a plausible alternative.
I'm telling them to come and talk to us. I'm not telling them they can't cut. They obviously have
I think
to
you
cut.
did say, I want you to say no.
Yeah.
Well, I want you to say no until he comes and talks to us. They do have to ask for,
They don't have to ask for
They
anything.
don't really have to ask, I mean, they
well,
were,
then why
they
they
were,
were in your office, right?
Their airspace.
Just to tell you that they were coming again.
Yes.
I'm sorry?
I guess I'd want to see a schedule, right? There's got to be some metrics around this activity, and I'm sure they have them. They're a very organized, great group of people, so.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I don't know this, but I think that maybe the prevalence of them lately is because they are doing the other lines that they only do every 5 or 6 years. They're doing all the ones that go up the streets as opposed to just,
I completely
South
concur.
Sewalls Point
And by the
Road.
way, they do need to be maintained, but I'm looking at the double poles. I'm looking at the additional concrete poles that are there now, next to the old wooden poles that still haven't had the wires taken off of them and put them on the concrete pole. So, yeah, I'm a little pissed off about this thing. I want them to do this project right, and I want them to protect the aesthetics of our community. So, yeah, I'm passionate about this one.
I appreciate your passion. I'm just afraid that your
I'm
success,
Don Quixote. I'm
your
not gonna deny that.
success probability is low here, that's all.
Just, if I could, just one other comment too. Thank you for letting me come and serve the town and the residents in this intervening time. Everyone has been very welcoming and very gracious, and so I do appreciate that.
Okay, we have any commissioner comments?
For now.
Commissioner Campo.
Maybe I could tee it up to the town manager, but we've got a lot to celebrate. We all got some really good news this week, right?
Yeah.
We spend a little time, maybe a little victory lap. Maybe Chloe can tell us of your ventures, and she comes to our meetings, and she really brought home the bacon. And if it would be okay with the commission, I'd like to hear a little bit of the travails and
I'd love to hear it.
and success story. And thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that too, and I was wondering too if, I was going to ask the town manager if we could have maybe Joe come in at the next meeting and kind of give us a summary. You know, we've essentially committed some of our ARPA money to the preliminary design report and also to the, I think, stormwater resiliency.
Master
And
plan.
according to what I read here, the 3.4 million as a $925,000 match, you know, where are we going to get that match from? I'm not sure, you know, that 3.4 million, can that be spent over 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? I have no idea, and how that fits in with Joe's schedule. I'd really like him to come in and talk about that, but please, welcome and go ahead.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chloe Sewalls. I'm your grant writer consultant. And yes, so last week it was announced on Tuesday in Pinellas County by the governor that Sewalls Point received 2.4 for their submission in the Coastal Resiliency Grant Fund. So this has been a little bit of a long time coming. I know the initial submission was in October, and we made the first cut of grants, and then this was now announced out of their Federal Reserve. So it's very, very exciting. We asked for 3.4 and we got the full ask. And I think, honestly, a huge part of it was not just the packaging of the project, because it is such an important project with the top critical asset that is transportation for that road, for what they were looking for, but I think communicating Sewalls Point's story, which is difficult to do. You get lost in the bunch. I mean, think about how many counties and municipalities are in the state. And over the series of multiple conversations, it was communicated that not only is Sewalls Point primed, especially for coastal resiliency, and you all in the town has a focus on these projects and getting these projects done for the betterment of the community, but also we're ready to work with the state in accomplishing that. And I think that that communication mixed with a really great package is what all helped you receive the funds. Another thing to keep in mind, and I know Mr. Joe Capro will tell you all, getting these projects done as soon as possible is the best bet, because this year there's also another $500 million going into coastal resiliency, and you all have projects that are eligible for those dollars. So now is the time to get it done, to get the most state match possible. So congratulations to you all. I know your conversations have been hard and tedious, and you all have represented the community. And I think you're going to get your projects accomplished. So, yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fender.
Stay here, Chloe. So, hey, that was awesome, thank you. I'm curious about the next rounding you just mentioned a second ago.
Okay.
There's more funding coming down. Are we positioned, what are we doing to make sure that we're submitting? And I'll have to follow my sword and say I wasn't even aware of a $3.4 million submission, but I'm stoked. But the question is, how do we resubmit and make sure that we're still in the process to get the rest of the resiliency done up the peninsula?
So I'm going to try not to get in the weeds, which I tend to do, but there's sort of two sections of the budget. Let's talk about that. So there's legislative appropriations, which goes with the session cycle. You all are very familiar with it. I see you guys in Tallahassee lobbying for those things and advocating. And so that's through the more political end, right? So you guys have 2 submissions up right now for the state for funding through that process, and that goes through their budget.
For roughly how much?
So you have 2 requests in. I believe one is at $1 million, and I think the other one's at $1 million as well. And
Wow, okay.
2 separate projects. One of them is this project as well, this phase 3.
All right.
I think it's phase 2.
No, phase
So
three.
Here we go.
The second
No.
phase, but it's phase 3. I know, it gets really, really complicated.
But it's phase 2, yeah.
I can testify, it's confusing.
I want to jump in and immediately, let's remove phases. I want to start, it is Pineapple to Ridgeland.
Yes.
Okay, it's Pineapple, let's
That is correct.
think of it that way. Let's
Words.
think
That's
of
what I
it.
was thinking of.
Use words,
That was called
everyone
phase
drives
2.
by those streets. It's paving, it's raising, it's widening, and it's stormwater treatment. So, I mean, we got a lot, it's the whole canopy. It's the whole canopy.
I
All that
apologize
flooding,
for that intro.
yes.
I apologize.
No,
It took me a long time to get the phases and how we were hopping around.
Yeah.
Seen him
Correct.
working. He followed so well, Mr. Hudson. It was impressive. 'cause
We have to rebrand, Pineapple to Ridgeland.
Pineapple, I like that, Pineapple to Ridgeland.
So-
Continue, I apologize.
Right now, the best bet we can is to continue to work with our legislative delegation for this current session to get money out of that pool. And so far, they're doing well. They've qualified, and we will see. That's a little bit more unpredictable because you're dealing with the entire state's politics. The second side is grant money. So the executive branch or governor has all the agencies underneath him, and he sets a budget that he asks the legislative process to adhere by, right, to fill that budget. And so that's where we're getting those grants. So coastal resiliency was granted $500 million in the last fiscal year. And so we went after that in the fall and winter time, right, because that's when it comes out. So here we go, session ends in March. So the budget will probably be finalized a month or two into that. So let's say May, June. Come July, August, the agencies will push forward their programs, and that's when we'll apply for the second set of funding.
Okay.
And then you'll wait until late fall, early winter again to find out whether you all receive those funds. So that's kind of how the cycle goes.
Now, are those the appropriations requests, are those recurring appropriations, or this is the first time we've applied for these particular ones?
So you guys have gone through the appropriations process in the past, and I believe you've gone through some of DEP's competitive grant process as well. This year, it's not necessarily recurring, but it's the same kind of model that they used last year budget-wise. So it's when you look at like wastewater and water quality programs and you look at coastal resiliency, they're doubling it. Like last year, they did this much, and then now they're doing that same amount again. So it's reoccurring in the sense we have an awesome state legislature and an awesome executive branch when it comes to environmental funding, and that money is being put in those pots each year.
Mr. Mayfield?
Oh, yeah, mine was more a commissioner comment at the end, so I apologize.
Okay.
It's very late.
Mr. Campo?
I was just going to say, this is DEP money. This is the same source of money that we got for the first phase. And I'm hoping, maybe optimistically, that they're looking at the progress that we've made. And this isn't just a bunch of talkers. This is a group of citizens that want to protect the water, protect the Indian River. Once we have that 800-pound gorilla, we can go to Indian River Lagoon Council. I mean, it brings a lot of gravitas with us. And, all the heartaches that we've done down at High Point through Sewalls Meadow is paying dividends. So I'm thrilled, and hopefully you can continue to be involved and help us with the next process, because
That sounds like an opportunity for matching funds.
yeah. So I talked to Joe about it, and he's very excited. It's when you get in those communities up there, it's people start seeing your name and they understand, and it's really exciting to be a part of. So I'm really excited to hear from Joe. I mean, I think we should probably get a report of what he's got. There's an STA opportunity at 78 South Sewalls Point Road, which is known as the Homewood section, so that we can filter out that water and have an outfall back behind there. That's Glenn's already kind of put in the plumbing on that and might need some tweaking to update. But we've got a lot of these pieces that we just put together, and that'll handle, I know this is a concern of Dave's, is the flooding. I mean, that is the number one place of flooding. People are driving through there, and there's going to be a space between Pineapple and Sewalls Meadow. But, we just got to do it one piece at a time. But I think it's the greatest need, and to have that large of an ask, 3.4, and you get 3.4. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Congratulations to Michelle, who was active in that process, and the whole team that you put together. So thanks for being here.
Congratulations to the town, so hopefully we can continue the good work. Thank you all.
And
Thanks,
by
Chloe.
the way, that was the largest grant by far that we've ever received. That's a tremendous record. I think it's 4 times greater than the largest we've ever
It's
seen.
a lot. It's exciting.
Okay, are there any other
Yeah, I had my.
commissioner comments? Commissioner Mayfield?
Yes, in the same vein, I had mentioned this to Town Manager Hudson, because I had talked about it with the prior town manager. We had talked about, when we were working on legislative stuff, doing some kind of ceremony for Phase 1 being done, if we wanted to celebrate. It looks great. I don't know how many people know how great it looks and how well it's working now. It's all done. All the properties are all linked up to the road, so I don't know if that's a possibility, but I think that would be fun. And
It's scheduled, right?
we had talked about it, and then it got delayed because it hadn't totally been done with the abutting properties.
Maybe we can ask
Yeah.
Mr. Hudson to talk to Joe and put something together.
Well, yeah, we'll take care of that, yeah, we'll get something scheduled.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Photo op.
Yeah. And maybe invite people down. If you don't live down there, you might not drive down there and see your tax dollars at work with a
See
successful.
where all the cool people live?
With the success, it works, right, Commissioner, Vice Mayor?
Even the properties look so much better with the new curb they put
Yeah.
there. Just the appeal of
Yeah, it
it
really
just changed the whole appearance.
Yeah.
It dressed up homes that just
Yeah,
didn't
no,
look as nice.
it's really nice. It was a
Gave
really
it a
good
whole
job.
new appearance. Tremendous job they did.
Okay, if there's no other staff or commissioner comments, motion to
So moved, adjournment.
adjourn. So moved.